Oliver's tiny body convulsed in my arms, his breath coming in shallow, wheezing gasps. His lips had turned an eerie shade of blue, and his eyes, those bright, curious eyes, were glassy with terror. He clawed at his throat, fingers trembling, as if he could somehow force the air back into his lungs. "Mama!" His voice was barely a whisper. My hands shook as I fumbled for the EpiPen, my mind a storm of panic and fear. I jabbed it into his thigh, my heart hammering against my ribs. Please, please, please work. I had seen this before. When he was 4, a rogue peanut crumb had sent him to the hospital for 2 days. But this was worse. His reaction was faster, more violent. His tiny frame shook with the force of his body betraying him. Sirens. Thank God. The ambulance was here. I scooped Oliver into my arms and sprinted toward the community gate, my feet barely touching the ground. Relief flooded my chest as I saw the flashing red and blue lights. The paramedics had arrived just in time, and then they stopped. Not because they were too late, not because they didn't see us. They stopped because someone was standing in their way. Karen Walker. Her arms were folded over her chest, her expression calm. Smug, even. The ambulance's engine rumbled, the paramedics yelling, but she didn't move. She was blocking the only entrance. "You need authorization to enter this community," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "No exceptions. Love seeing entitled people get what they deserve. Subscribe for more crazy stories like this." I stumbled forward, Oliver still gasping in my arms. "Karen, move. My son is dying." She didn't even flinch. "The rules are the rules, Emma," she said, shaking her head. "If I let them through without proper authorization, it sets a bad precedent. A bad precedent." I was so stunned I almost forgot Oliver was fading in my arms. Almost. One of the paramedics leaned out the driver's window, his voice sharp with urgency. "Ma'am, this is a medical emergency. Step aside or we will be forced to." Karen held up a hand. I don't respond well to threats. I wanted to scream, to tear my hair out. Was she serious? My son was turning blue. He needed that ambulance now. The crowd had gathered. Neighbors, party-goers from the event, people who had seen Oliver collapse. They were murmuring, horrified, but no one moved. No one pushed past Karen. I turned to one of them, an older man who had always been kind to Oliver. "Help me, please. He's not breathing." He shifted uncomfortably. I can't get involved." Something inside me snapped. Oliver gasped again, a thin, ragged sound. Too shallow. Too slow. I turned back to Karen, stepping so close our noses almost touched. My voice was a deadly whisper. "If my son dies because of you, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life." Karen barely reacted. She just sighed. "I'm sorry, Emma, but..." The paramedics didn't wait. One of them was already grabbing his radio, calling dispatch. "We've got a child in respiratory distress, civilian obstruction at the entrance, requesting immediate police assistance." Karen scoffed. "Oh, don't be dramatic. I'm simply enforcing the rules." The rules. My child was dying, and this woman was talking about rules. A neighbor finally stepped forward, a young woman with fire in her eyes. "Karen, if you don't move, we will move you." Karen turned to face her, but the distraction was all I needed. I sprinted toward the gate, my legs burning, my lungs aching. If she wouldn't move, then I'd find another way. But the walls were too high, the metal bars too close together. I spun around, chest heaving. I had to do something. I wasn't going to lose him. I met the paramedic's eyes. "Drive through it." The driver hesitated. "What?" "Drive through the damn gate." I screamed. "I'll take full responsibility. Just get my son to the hospital." Karen's face turned red. "You wouldn't dare." The paramedics didn't even hesitate. The ambulance reversed. The crowd gasped. Karen's eyes widened. No, stop them. I wrapped my arms around Oliver's frail body, shielding him as best as I could, and then the ambulance charged forward. The sound was deafening, with splintering, metal groaning, screams. The gate, the almighty HOA gate that Karen had so proudly protected, was obliterated. The ambulance didn't slow down. It roared through the wreckage, screeching to a stop beside me. The back doors flung open, and 2 paramedics jumped out. They grabbed Oliver from my arms, laying him on a stretcher, oxygen mask secured over his face. I climbed in after them, my entire body shaking. As the doors slammed shut and the sirens blared again, I caught one last glimpse of Karen through the back window. She stood frozen, mouth open in shock. The crowd was turning on her. For the first time, she looked afraid. And she should be, because this wasn't over. The ambulance roared down the street, sirens wailing, but my mind was still stuck at that gate. Stuck on the image of Karen standing there, arms crossed, deciding that my son's life wasn't worth bending her precious rules. I clutched Oliver's limp hand as the paramedics worked frantically around him. The oxygen mask covered half his face, his tiny chest rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. "Stay with me, baby," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Mommy's here. You're going to be okay." One of the paramedics, a man with steady hands and kind eyes, adjusted the 4 in Oliver's arm. "We're pushing epinephrine again. His throat is still swelling, but we're stabilizing him as best we can." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Outside the window, the city blurred past in streaks of streetlights and taillights. The hospital wasn't far. We just needed time. But time was exactly what Karen had stolen from us. The doors slammed open the second we arrived, and suddenly we were surrounded. Doctors, nurses, stretchers, hands reaching, lifting, moving. I was pulled aside as they rushed Oliver into the emergency room. "Ma'am, we need you to wait here," a nurse told me firmly. "No, please. I need to be with him." A hand rested on my shoulder. "Let them work," the paramedic said gently. "They're doing everything they can." I stood there, helpless, as my son disappeared behind swinging doors. And then the rage hit me, a deep, burning anger that curled in my stomach like a storm. Karen, that woman, had watched Oliver gasping for air and chose to do nothing. She had heard the sirens. She had seen the panic, and she had decided that her HOA policies mattered more than my child's life. I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers and opened my messages. "Me." She blocked the ambulance. "Oliver almost died." Within seconds, my best friend, Natalie, replied. "Natalie, what?" "Where are you?" "Me. City Memorial. He's in the ER. I don't know anything yet." "Natalie, I'm on my way, and I swear to God, that woman is going to regret this." I didn't have the energy to text back. Instead, I turned to the paramedic still standing next to me. "Do you have body cams?" He blinked. "What?" "The ambulance," I said, my voice sharp. "Did you record what happened at the gate?" His jaw tightened. "Yes. We always have dash cams running." I exhaled, something dangerous settling in my chest. "I want a copy." He hesitated. "I can't release it personally, but the hospital will have access to the report." "And the police?" "The police." For the first time since the chaos started, I allowed myself to breathe. Karen had been untouchable in that community for years, bullying, controlling, deciding who followed the rules and who didn't. But not this time. Not with this. I wasn't just going to make her pay. I was going to ruin her. The minutes stretched into hours. Natalie arrived, practically vibrating with rage. But before she could even launch into a rant about Karen, a doctor stepped into the waiting area. "Oliver Brooks?" I shot to my feet. "Here." The doctor smiled, a little tired but reassuring. "Your son is stable. We got to him in time." My legs nearly gave out. Natalie grabbed my arm as I gasped out. "Can I see him? The doctor nodded. He's groggy, but he's awake. Nothing else mattered. I practically ran down the hall, pushing past curtains and monitors until I saw him. Oliver, lying in the hospital bed, his eyes barely open. I dropped into the chair beside him, taking his hand in mine. "Hey, baby," I whispered, pressing a kiss to his knuckles. He blinked sluggishly. "Did we win, Mama?" I let out a choked laugh, tears slipping down my face. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered. "We won." But this wasn't over, because the moment Oliver fell back asleep, I had work to do. I stepped out of the hospital room, my body still trembling with leftover adrenaline. Natalie was waiting for me, arms crossed. "What's the plan?" she asked, her eyes glinting. I clenched my fists. "I want the police involved. Now." Natalie's grin was positively wicked. "Already ahead of you." She held up her phone, and when I leaned in, I saw the messages, screenshots, videos, everything. Our neighbors had filmed everything. The argument, the way Karen stood in front of the ambulance, the moment the paramedics had to ram through the gate. And the best part, it was going viral. The comments were flooding in, filled with pure outrage. This woman should be in prison. Arrest her. Immediately. I hope the HOA gets sued into oblivion. I felt something cold and righteous settle in my bones. "Send everything to the police," I said. Natalie was already dialing, and in that moment I knew. Karen thought she was untouchable. She thought her rules were law. But she was about to find out what happens when you try to play God with someone's life. Because I wasn't going to stop until she lost everything. The police arrived at the hospital the next morning. I had barely slept, my body wired with exhaustion and fury, but I forced myself upright when I saw them approaching. 2 officers, 1 male, 1 female, both wearing unreadable expressions. "Mrs. Brooks," the female officer asked. I nodded, gripping my coffee so tightly the cup nearly crumpled. "We need to discuss last night's incident," she continued, pulling out a small notepad. "We've already reviewed the 911 call and the footage from the ambulance dash cam, but we want to hear everything from you directly." I swallowed hard and took a steadying breath. She stood there, I said, my voice colder than I expected. She watched my son dying and did nothing. The male officer took notes as I spoke, but the female officer was studying me carefully. "You believe she intentionally delayed medical assistance." I let out a bitter laugh. "Believe? It's on camera." Natalie, who had been standing beside me the whole time, pulled out her phone. And here's what the neighborhood filmed. She pressed play, and we all watched as Karen smirked at the paramedics, arms folded, shaking her head. I don't respond well to threats. Then came the footage of the ambulance ramming through the gate, the splintering wood, the gasps of the crowd. The female officer's face darkened. The male officer finished writing and tucked his notepad away. "We'll be filing a report with the district attorney. From what we've gathered, Karen Walker may be looking at charges for obstruction of emergency medical services, reckless endangerment, and criminal negligence." A sharp, satisfying weight settled in my chest. "She needs to be arrested," I said firmly. The female officer hesitated. "We're moving as quickly as we can, but legal processes take time. In the meantime, I'd advise you to stay alert. People like her." She exchanged a glance with her partner. "Don't handle consequences well." I knew what she meant. Karen had spent years controlling our community. She had built a little kingdom within those HOA rules, deciding who deserved leniency and who needed to be punished. And I had just shattered it all in a single night. The officers left soon after, promising updates, and I turned to Natalie. "She's going to retaliate," I muttered. "Oh, I count on it," Natalie said, crossing her arms. "And I'll be right there to record every second." Oliver was awake when I returned to his room. His face was still pale, his eyes a little unfocused, but when he saw me, he smiled weakly. "Mom!" I rushed to his side, brushing his hair from his forehead. "I'm here, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" He wiggled his fingers. Kinda floaty. The medicine is helping, I said, forcing a smile. You scared me, kid. Oliver blinked slowly. Did the bad lady go to jail? Not yet, but she would. I kissed his forehead. Don't worry about that, okay? Just focus on getting better. But Oliver didn't look satisfied. He licked his dry lips, shifting uncomfortably. Mom. Yes, baby. He hesitated, then whispered. What if she does this to someone else? I stiffened, because I had thought about it too. What if another child needed an ambulance? What if an elderly neighbor had a heart attack? Would Karen stand there, arms crossed, watching them suffer just to prove she had the power? A cold determination settled in my chest. I wasn't just going after her for me. I was going to make sure she never had the chance to hurt anyone again. We were discharged that evening. Oliver was still weak, but stable, and the doctors assured me he would make a full recovery. As I drove us home, my hands clenched the steering wheel. I half expected Karen to be waiting at the wreck gate, but she wasn't. Instead, I found my inbox flooded with messages from neighbors. Karen is furious. She's blaming you for everything. She says you destroyed HOA property and that you should be arrested. Be careful. She's talking to her lawyer. I exhaled slowly, gripping my phone. Of course she was. Karen wasn't the type to apologize, to admit wrongdoing. She was the type to double down. The house was quiet when I tucked Oliver into bed. I sat beside him for a long time, watching his small chest rise and fall, the beeping of his new heart rate monitor filling the silence. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Mrs. Brooks, came the clipped voice. This is Diane Parsons, legal representative of the Willow Ridge HOA. I smirked to myself. Here we go. I'm calling to inform you that your actions last night were a direct violation of community policy. The HOA will be pursuing legal action for property damage and violation of community safety protocols. I let out a slow breath, my grip tightening on the phone. Is that so? Yes. Furthermore, Karen Walker has suffered emotional distress due to the false accusations you spread about her. I laughed. Actually laughed. Let me get this straight, I said, voice razor sharp. She blocks an ambulance while my son is dying, and now she's the victim? This conversation is being recorded, Diane said stiffly. Oh, good. Then make sure you record this too. I have footage, witnesses, police reports. Karen Walker is going to jail. And if this HOA backs her up, you're all going down with her. Silence. Then a quiet. I see. I smiled. I'll be expecting your lawsuit, I said. And you'll be expecting mine. I hung up and leaned back, my heart pounding. Karen had started a war, and I was going to end it. The news broke faster than I expected. By the time I woke up the next morning, Karen Walker's name was everywhere. Local news stations ran headlines. HOA president blocks ambulance. Child nearly dies. The viral video from my neighbors had millions of views, and the comments were relentless. People were furious. How is this woman not in handcuffs already? I hope that mother sues the HOA into oblivion. Karen deserves jail. No excuses. And my personal favorite, you mess with a mother's child, you get the wrath. I didn't have time to bask in the satisfaction. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Emma, she's done. Natalie's voice practically crackled with glee. The HOA just had an emergency meeting. They're cutting ties with Karen. She's been removed as president. I closed my eyes and exhaled. Good, I muttered. But it's not enough. Natalie hummed. Oh, I know. That's why I thought you want to see this. A link popped up on my phone. I clicked it. Breaking. District Attorney confirms charges against HOA President Karen Walker. I nearly dropped my coffee. They're pressing charges? I whispered. 3. Natalie sounded positively giddy. Obstruction of emergency medical services, reckless endangerment, and criminal negligence. I let out a breathless laugh. They actually did it. Damn right they did. And guess what? The HOA is panicking. They're terrified of a lawsuit. Some of the board members are already jumping ship. My smile sharpened. They should be, because I wasn't done. I spent the rest of the day gathering everything. The security footage, the 911 call logs, the paramedics' reports. By the time my lawyer and I met that afternoon, I had a case so airtight it might as well have been made of steel. And when the lawsuit against the HOA was filed, it made even bigger headlines than Karen's arrest. HOA hit with massive lawsuit after ambulance incident. Will they survive the fallout? I hope not. I wasn't in this for money. I didn't need a settlement. I wanted change. I wanted every single HOA in the country to see this and realize that their power trips had limits. And that limit, a mother's rage. Days passed, then a week, then 2. Oliver got stronger every day. The swelling in his throat went down. His energy returned. The nightmares, however, were harder to shake. One night, I found him curled up in bed, staring at the ceiling. "Mom," he whispered. I brushed his hair back. "Yeah, baby." "Is she going to jail?" I hesitated. "I don't know yet." He swallowed. "She scared me." I kissed his forehead. "She scared me too." The court date arrived faster than expected. I didn't go. I didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself. The judge was ruthless. Karen tried to argue that she was simply following protocol. The judge wasn't having it. "You deliberately blocked emergency medical personnel from doing their job," he told her, voice like a blade. "A child could have died because of your arrogance." Karen stammered. I was just enforcing the rules." "The rules," the judge said coldly, "do not come before a human life." And just like that, she was sentenced. 6 months in jail. A lifetime of being a disgrace. The courtroom erupted. Some people were horrified. Others, cheering. And me? I just sat back and smiled. The lawsuit against the HOA dragged out longer, but eventually they settled. The amount? Undisclosed. But let's just say Oliver's college fund was more than taken care of. The best part? New emergency protocols were enforced across multiple HOAs. Because of my lawsuit, a statewide law was introduced. No gated community could block emergency vehicles, no matter what. I had changed the system. And Karen, she lost everything. Her power, her status, her little HOA kingdom. She'd have to live the rest of her life knowing that when people looked up her name, the first thing they'd see was the woman who let a child nearly die over a stupid rule. And that was justice. Oliver and I moved away a few months later. I didn't want to live in that community anymore. The house was tainted. But the day we left, something happened. As I was loading the last box into the car, a woman from the neighborhood walked up. An older woman. Someone I had only spoken to a few times. She hesitated, then placed something in my hand. A small golden key. I frowned. "What's this?" She smiled sadly. The original master key to the gate. The one Karen refused to use that night. I stared at it, my throat tightening. "I thought you should have it," she said softly. A reminder that sometimes the rules are meant to be broken. I swallowed hard and tucked the key into my pocket. Then I got into the car, buckled Oliver in, and drove away. A new chapter awaited us. A fresh start. And the key in my pocket? That was just a reminder. A reminder of the day I learned the most important rule of all. No rule should ever come before a life.